Hi, this is Ebody Next from the Candid Frame, and as promised, I'm going to walk you through another black and white conversion. This time we're going to be using Silver Efex Pro 2. As you may have seen last week, I just showed you how I use Adobe Lightroom and the tools therein in order to do a quick and dirty black and white conversion. Silver Efex Pro 2, though, has been probably my favorite plugin for black and white conversions because of the level of control and versatility that's available in that plugin. But before I jump into that, I just want to show you this image here, which we're going to be working with. Now, this is a photograph that I made during my trip to Paris during a demonstration there. And with this image, I've already tweaked the image in terms of white balance, brightness, contrast, structure, and all those things. So this image, this color image, is pretty much the way I would like the image to look if I were going to print it. Now I'll just simply show you what I did for the black and white version, which was just simply hitting the black and white option in Lightroom to create the black and white. So this is the image in color, and let's see what it looks like in black and white. So with all the adjustments that I've made in Lightroom, just hitting the black and white treatment makes this image a pretty pleasing black and white image. And you might think that, well, I really don't have to do much else because it looks pretty darn good. But for me, the image is a little flat and it lacks the kind of impact that I would like it to have. There was a lot of energy present here, and this image just doesn't seem to capture it in the way that I've rendered the black and white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it into Silver Efex Pro. And before, at one point, I would have just taken this image as is and just converted it over to black and white. But what I've tended to do now is I tend to now flatten the image, and I'll show you here the shot. And you'll see here when we go back into the Develop module that I'm brightening the image by increasing the exposure, reducing the contrast, opening up the highlights, as well as darkening the highlights a little, opening up the shadows, making the adjustments to the white, leaving the black where it is, and reducing the clarity. And as you can see, it looks like a terrible rendering of a color image. And the reason why I'm creating this flat version of the shot is that I know when I bring it into Silver Efex Pro, I'm going to be doing a lot of global and localized increasing of contrast. And if I bring in an image in which I've already done that, where I've already boosted the contrast, resulting in a loss of detail in the shadows and some details in the midtones, what happens is when I bring it into Silver Efex, that further enhancement of the contrast means I'm going to be losing more and more detail in the shadows, which I may or may not want to lose. So by creating a very flat image as I bring it into Silver Efex, I'm able to maintain the level of control that I want over the contrast throughout the image and also localized. And I find that by flattening the image in this way, I'm able to do that much better than bringing in a color image in which I've already done and made all those adjustments. Now, if you take a look over here in my collections and my presets, you'll see that under my presets, I've created several different flat versions or presets for flat versions. I've done one for my 5D Mark III for an Olympus that I was using for the Samsung, and here for the X100S, which created this image. So I created some presets because I know that for a lot of my pictures, I like to convert over to black and white. So rather than going in individually and adjusting all these controls on the right, I can just start from one of my presets, and then if I need to tweak it any further, I can just make the adjustments here on the control, saving me a lot of time. But I'm going to take the flat image into Silver Efex Pro 2. I'm going to edit a copy with the Lightroom adjustments to make sure that all these changes are pulled into the plugin. And now we have it. So you can see a very flat looking image. Now, one of the great things about Silver Efex Pro are these presets here. You have extensive controls here on the right for all these adjustments that you can make. And you can certainly just start from scratch if you want to, but I find myself often using these presets because they often get me into the ballpark, and then I can just use the controls on the right to refine the look. So by just hitting the down arrow key, I can go and cycle through all the presets that exist in here and get a sense of, what might work for me and what doesn't work for me. And, you can go through all of these on your own, but I found that there are certain ones that I kind of favor already. So there are about 9 that I have in my favorites that I kind of default to. So this is neutral. This is high structure harsh, which I find I often use for a lot of photographs. Here's high structure smooth, which is kind of in line with what I'm looking for. Push process, even better. That's okay. This makes it a little flatter. We got wet rocks here, which I'm really liking. And I'll go through it. And then I hit Film Noir 2, Film Noir 3 here. And this one I really like. It has that contrast. It has that pop that I'm looking for. And you can see that as compared to the original image, this looks really good. But I was thinking that maybe this takes it a little bit too far for me. And I could refine it from here, but I think that what I'll do is I'll take a look at wet rocks. And that's an improvement over what I started here. And I think this is going to be where my starting point is going to be. As much as I like what the Noir, Film Noir does, I probably would do that if I really didn't have time or had a desire to tweak it any further, because I could just take this, remove the white border, the edge, take that off, which I can do right here, and just be pretty happy with that. But I think I'm going to go with wet rocks. Try to say that fast 3 times, boy. All right, so here I have the image here, and I can go here now, and I can just start tweaking the individual adjustments. But before I start messing around with this, one of the first things I want to see is what's happening with my blacks and my whites. So if you go down here to the loop and histogram view, you have these numbers down here, which each represents a zone within the zone system, which was made famous by Ansel Adams. So when I go here to 0, that's establishing what my blackest blacks are. The blacks with no detail at all. And then the 10 is the area of white with no detail. So most of my dark tones are happening between 0 and 1 here. And one of the first things I want to do is I want to increase the contrast. And before I go into a curves adjustment or a contrast adjustment, what I want to do is I just simply want to darken those dark tones without impacting everything else. Though I have this brightness control here, it would affect the entire image globally by either making it brighter or darker. I don't want to do it globally. What I want to do is I want to impact the shadow. So I've clicked on the 0 here, and when I do that, it leaves these little yellow speckles in the frame. It keeps them visible on the screen. So as I move this shadow slider, I can start seeing how much more shadow detail I'm losing by moving the slider over. So I'm going to go all the way with this. And then I'm going to disable it. And I can see already that just that one tweak has made it a little darker. It's increased the contrast, but I've only impacted the shadow detail, which is kind of what I wanted here. I'm going to leave the midtones and the highlights alone, but I'm going to see what the dynamic brightness does. Right now it's set for 0%. And again, I'm going to just tweak it a little. If I go to 24%, you can see I'm creating an overall brightness. And then as I go here, it makes it a little darker. I don't want to tweak that very much. I'm just going to go up to about 4%. I'm kind of happy with that. I'm so close to what I want just from the preset alone. I don't have to make that much of an adjustment. So next I'm going to go over here to the contrast. And here I'm able to amplify blacks and amplify whites in terms of creating an increase of contrast within that localized area. I don't want to increase the highlights because what happens is as those areas that I've made darker get brightened up because of the surrounding areas that are brighter. I don't want that. It's putting me in the same boat where I started, where the overall scene is as important as the center of the frame, and I don't want that. So I'm going to leave that down to 0, but I'm going to see what amplify blacks does. And it's not doing a whole lot here. So I'm going to just leave it there at 0, but let me see what soft contrast does. I suspect I'm going to leave it where it was. And yeah, you can see here as I move it over to the left, it's brightening things up a little bit in terms of contrast. And then over here, it's darkening it a bit. And I'm just going to leave it here at 0. The preset did such a good job with for me that I'm really having no need to adjust the contrast. Here's structure, which is a popular tool to use in order to increase the micro contrast, the mid-tone contrast of a shot. But the mid-tone contrast has already been increased significantly here to up to 68%. So if I hit the space bar and I look at this image a little close up, I can already see that in terms of structure, it's already done a pretty good job. I'm getting a little haloing here around the microphone. So let me see if I reduce this a little bit. And let me see if I reduce the midtones. Okay, that's not too bad. But I really didn't need to make too much of an adjustment in terms of that kind of contrast, because if I boost it too much, I may get a lot of haloing, and I really don't want that. So it's pretty much on the mark for what I'm going for. So let me compare it to what I had. And so I'm getting there. So now what I want to do is I want to create some more localized editing, because as much as I like the overall shot, I'm still facing the issue that, well, the eye is wandering all over the place, and I want to emphasize this area here. So I start looking at the image and thinking about, okay, what areas within the frame are distracting the viewer from the center of the frame. And for that, I'm looking at areas of brightness. And one of the obvious areas of brightness is the top of this person's head, and this person's head, and this guy's jacket, and this hand here. All of these things are brighter than the figures of the faces here, and I don't want that. I don't want your eye to go here, because I think it weakens the impact of the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Selective Adjustment tool, and I'm going to, using my my mouse, create this area around here, and I will darken the hair to about minus, let's see, about minus 20, minus 19. And I'm also going to increase the contrast a little bit, 37%. And then I'm going to take this indicator and I'm going to move over here to the top of the head, to the hand over here, to the body of the jacket, and also to the top of the jacket. And almost immediately you can see the difference that's making to the shot here. Now, one of the effects that this is happening, this select area here is impacting his face. I don't want that. So I'm going to take a control point, add it to his face without making any additional adjustments. And basically, it will relegate the impact of this area to just this. I could also make this area a little smaller. But if I'm concerned with these control points having an adverse influence on any adjoining area, what I can simply do is just add a control point to any part of the frame where I don't want it to have an adverse effect, and control it. So I'm going to take these control points and I'm going to look elsewhere in the frame where I don't want that brightness. Let's darken the pillar in the building over here, over here, over here. Do I want this guy's shirt? Yeah, there's a face and a head here. And here, this woman's face over here. And you can see how just by the position of that control point, you can darken this. You know, you can imagine trying to do this with an adjustment brush in Lightroom, and this is just so much easier because I just take that same control point and just move it around the frame, making every area that I want slightly darker, and that's done a good job. So I want to brighten up this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more control points here to this woman's face. This woman's face here, this woman's face here, to the hand, to her hand here, to her notebook. Okay. And I could go in individually and affect all these adjustments, but I don't want to have to do that individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go just outside the margin for where those selections are, and I am going to create a box. And what happens is that all the control points within that box now will be adjusted just by me moving the slider for one of the control points. So now, as I increase the brightness for one control point, all the other ones are being affected equally. So I've increased the brightness. I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit. I could increase the structure, but I'm not going to do that. I have also other controls for amplify white, amplify blacks. This one is for structure, and this is selective color. So let's see what happens when I select the whites. I can open that up a little bit. And I think I'm good with those adjustments, and then I can just click out of here, and I've brightened this area here, and the rest of the image is relatively a little darker. I need to take this a little further, however, because as much as all this minor tweaking has helped, I'm still dealing with these areas being a little brighter than I would like them to be, and for that I'm simply going to use a vignette. So I'll just go into my vignette control here, and I'll increase the amount of the vignette, and let me choose a vignette first. Let's go with black frame. Let's go with black frame 2. So I'm going to go 100% with the vignette, and then I'm going to increase the size so that it's isolating that area in the middle. And let's see, do I want it a circle? Kind of change the shape slightly so it's in between a circle and a rectangle. So I can see here, yeah, this is the area that I want to emphasize, but obviously the vignette is a little bit too aggressive. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull back the amount and then try to find a sweet spot where the vignette doesn't call too much attention to itself. I want it to be fairly subtle. So I think about minus 16% is about doing it. So let me take a look at this. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now I have most of my adjustments, but if I'm concerned with the image being a little flat, I can go into film types and I can adjust the contrast of the curve. I'm taking a look at this again. Well, before I make that adjustment, let me just go ahead and adjust the curve slightly to increase the overall contrast. So I'm going to brighten this a little bit, and then I'm going to take the midtones. Where should it be? The shadows. Yeah, I'm going to bring in the shadows in a little more. Let me check where those shadows are falling. Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm not losing too much there. And then I'm going to boost the highlights. And I'm good right there. Taking a look at this, I think that the vignette is a little bit too aggressive, so I'm going to actually just pull back this on this even more and go down to about 10% here. And so the image looks really good, and the finishing touch is always a border for me, especially in the black and white. I just like a border. So I tend to favor a really simple one, which is type 13, and then I just reduce the size to 90%. I just want just a slight border around the image. And then I'll hit save. Of course, this is taking me longer than it normally would because I'm having to explain it. But you can see that for the most part, once I flatten the image and I choose the appropriate preset, I'm not having to do a whole lot in order to make the shot work for me. So I'm going to show you. This is the flattened image, which I don't want. This is the color image, and let me quickly convert it over to black and white for you. And now I'll compare the two. So I'll just hit my command key, choose both of those and hit the C key to go into compare mode. And now you can see the resulting difference. Here's the original image on the left that has just been tweaked in terms of color, for contrast, levels, all the usual stuff, and then the treatment simply switched over to black and white. And then on the right is the image that I flattened by basically reducing the contrast, the brightness, and so on and so forth in Lightroom, brought it into Silver Efex Pro 2, and then used a preset plus some minor tweaking to improve the shot. So I feel like this is a much more successful black and white treatment than this would be. I think that more of the attention here is on the center of the frame, and that the treatment as I've done it really doesn't call attention to the fact that I've done all this sort of localized control. It really looks good to me. And one of the nice things about it is that I can actually have taken that treatment that I did in Silver Efex Pro 2 and saved it as a preset, much like I can save presets in Lightroom. So if I wanted to take a bunch of images that I had shot in color, once I had made the color adjustments, I could just take that same preset and apply it to create a real consistent black and white conversion for all the images that I shot during this trip, making it a whole lot easier. So rather than going in there and having to do this individually from shot to shot to shot, which is tedious and time consuming, this really helps you get closer. Silver Efex Pro 2 is really extensive. I'm just sort of glossing on the surface of its capabilities, but even with a few limited controls that I demonstrated here so far, you can see the power that's inherent with this plugin and why it's become so popular. So if you haven't tried it, I suggest that you download it. I'm sure that they have a free trial. I'm not sure exactly for how long, but you can probably play with it and see how it may fit your specific photographic needs. But we'll be playing with some other plugins, and I'll be showing you some of the strengths of some of those other applications, because as much as I love Nik Silver Efex Pro 2, some of these other plugins have some really cool capabilities that I'm finding indispensable, and you might find them as valuable as well. So I hope you've liked this video, and if you have, please throw me a comment in the notes here and let me know what you think. And if you haven't already, start listening to The Candid Frame, which you can find at thecandidframe.com, where I do interviews with some of the world's best established and emerging photographers. It's a great resource if you want an alternative to podcasts that just talk about gear. And again, if you like what you're seeing here in these videos, please subscribe. All right, well, thanks a lot for joining me again, and see you next time.